Destroy the old you, create a new version of yourself. Introduction. Right now, you are trapped in an identity that no longer serves you. Every day, you wake up, follow the same habits, think the same thoughts, and live the same patterns. But what if I told you that who you are is not permanent? What if you could choose a new identity, one that serves your highest potential? Most people believe they are stuck as they are. They think their personality, habits, and failures define them forever. But that's not true. Your identity is a story, and like any story, it can be rewritten. This audiobook will teach you how to destroy the old version of yourself and rebuild someone stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. To change, you must let go of everything you thought you knew about yourself. Your excuses, your doubts, and your fears must be burned away like a phoenix rising from the ashes. This transformation will not be easy, and it will not be comfortable. But if you are willing to take this journey, you will discover a version of yourself that is greater than you ever imagined. Now let's begin with the first chapter. Chapter 1. Your identity is a choice. Think about this. If you woke up tomorrow with complete amnesia, who would you be? Would you still be the same person, carrying the same fears, doubts, and habits? Or would you be free to shape yourself however you wanted? Most people believe their identity is permanent, like a stone carving that cannot be changed. But in reality, your identity is like writing in the sand. It can be erased and rewritten at any time. The only reason it feels permanent is that you keep reinforcing it with your thoughts and actions. Every morning you put on an identity like a coat. You tell yourself, I'm not confident, I'm bad at speaking, or I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. These thoughts become habits, shaping the choices you make and the opportunities you ignore. But what if those thoughts weren't true? Let's take the story of Malcolm X. Before he became one of the most influential leaders in history, he was known as Detroit Red, a street hustler living a life of crime. If he had accepted that identity as permanent, he would have never changed. But when he was sent to prison, he made a radical choice. He burned the old version of himself to the ground. Behind bars, Malcolm X didn't just read books. He devoured them. He copied entire dictionaries by hand, transforming himself from someone who could barely write into one of the greatest speakers of his time. He didn't try to improve Detroit Red. He destroyed him. This is the key to real transformation. You don't just make small changes. You must completely let go of the version of yourself that is holding you back. The question is, are you ready to do the same? Chapter 2. True change requires destruction. You've tried to change before. You've set goals, started new habits, and tried to improve little by little. But where has that gotten you? The truth is, small changes are not enough. You cannot gently step into a new version of yourself. True transformation requires destruction. You must be willing to burn away the old beliefs, the outdated habits, and the limiting identity that has kept you stuck. Think of a phoenix. Before it can rise into something greater, it must first burn to ashes. The same is true for you. You cannot hold on to your old self and expect to become something new. Most people never change because they are too afraid to let go. They cling to their comfortable failures, their well-worn excuses, and the familiar patterns that make them feel safe. They say, I know this isn't the best life, but at least I know what to expect. But you are different. You picked up this audiobook because something inside you is screaming for change. That voice inside you is telling you that you are meant for more. And if you want to become that new version of yourself, you must destroy everything that is keeping you small. Think about the labels you've accepted. I'm shy. I'm not creative. I'm not smart enough. These are not truths. They are stories you have told yourself for so long that they feel real. But they are not set in stone. You can rewrite them at any moment. The only question is, will you let go of the old you? Chapter 3. Neuroscience shows you can change. Your personality, habits, and thoughts feel permanent, but science tells us something different. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself. Every time you learn something new, take a risk, or change a habit, your brain physically changes. This means that you are not stuck. You are not limited. You are not permanently shaped by your past. The reason most people don't change is not because they can't. it's because they won't. They believe they are stuck, so they stop trying. But the truth is, your potential is limitless. The only thing stopping you is the story you keep telling yourself. Think about this. If you tell yourself, I'm bad at public speaking, your brain will look for proof. Every time you get nervous, stumble over your words, or feel uncomfortable, your brain will say, see, I told you. But if you start telling yourself, I'm becoming a great speaker, your brain will begin to rewire itself to match that belief. Leo's story is a perfect example. He spent years believing he was the quiet one, too afraid to speak up in meetings or share his ideas. One day he asked himself a simple question. What if I'm wrong about who I am? Instead of saying, what would I do? He asked, what would a confident person do? And then he acted accordingly. He spoke up even when his heart pounded. He said yes to social events even when he wanted to hide. At first it felt like an act. He looked in the mirror and thought, who am I trying to fool? But after a few weeks, something changed. His actions became natural. His confidence became real. And in just 3 months, his coworkers no longer saw him as the quiet guy. They saw him as a leader. This is how change happens, not by hoping, not by waiting, but by choosing a new story and living it. Chapter 4. Breaking free from the fear of letting go. Most people will never experience true transformation because they are too afraid to let go. They hold on to their old selves like a security blanket, even when that identity is holding them back. They think, this is just who I am. But that's not true. Who you are is a choice. When Malcolm X decided to reinvent himself, he didn't do it halfway. He didn't hold on to Detroit Red while trying to become Malcolm X. He let go completely. He didn't just learn new things, he became a new person. The same is possible for you. Right now, you are holding on to beliefs about yourself that are not true. You are telling yourself a story that is keeping you small. But if you are willing to let go, you can become someone completely new. The question is, are you ready? Destroy the old you, create a new version of yourself. Chapter 5. The stories that shape your reality. Imagine someone who followed you around with a microphone, recording every thought that crossed your mind. What would they hear? Would it be the voice of confidence and power, or the whispers of doubt and fear? Most people don't realize that their internal dialogue is shaping their entire reality. The thoughts you repeat daily aren't just random. They are scripts rehearsed for years, maybe even decades. And the more you tell yourself a certain story, the more real it becomes. Think about this. If every morning you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I always fail, or I'm not the type of person who succeeds, what happens? These thoughts become instructions. Your brain takes them as facts and acts accordingly, shaping your decisions and reinforcing your limitations. Now imagine a different scenario. What if instead of telling yourself those old limiting stories, you started telling yourself something new? I am capable. I am strong. I can create any life I choose. Your brain would begin to rewire itself, looking for proof that these statements are true. This isn't just positive thinking. It's science. Consider Oprah Winfrey's story. She was born into poverty in rural Mississippi, raised by a teenage mother. Society handed her a script. Stay small, expect little, accept your place. But Oprah refused to accept that narrative. She chose to write her own story. Even when working as a local news anchor, she was told she was too emotional, that she didn't belong in television. She didn't let others define her. Instead of trying to fit into someone else's version of success, she leaned into her authenticity, turning what others saw as weaknesses into her greatest strengths. When she was demoted from her news anchor position to a morning talk show, most people would have seen it as a failure. But Oprah didn't. She reframed it as an opportunity. She took that small talk show and turned it into The Oprah Winfrey Show, the highest-rated program of its kind in history. Her success didn't come from luck. It came from the ability to rewrite her story. Now, think about your own life. What narratives have you accepted without questioning? What beliefs about yourself have you repeated so often that they feel like facts? Maybe you believe you're bad at relationships. Maybe you've convinced yourself you're not a leader. Maybe you think success just isn't in your DNA. None of these are facts. They are just stories you practiced. And the good news? You can rewrite them. Emma, a marketing executive, lived under the belief that she was terrible at relationships. Every bad date, every failed relationship became proof of this story. She didn't realize she wasn't discovering the truth. She was creating it. Her transformation began when she started questioning her thoughts. When she caught herself thinking, I always mess things up, she asked, is that really true? Or is that just a story I've been telling myself? She began deliberately rewriting her internal script. Instead of saying, I'm bad at relationships, she told herself, I am learning and growing in how I connect with others. Instead of, I always choose the wrong people, she shifted to, I am getting better at recognizing healthy partnerships. The shift wasn't immediate, but over time, her actions started aligning with her new story. She started setting better boundaries. She stopped sabotaging connections out of fear. And one day she met someone who saw her as she truly was, not as the old story she used to tell herself. Her transformation wasn't magic. It was a choice, and it's a choice available to you. So ask yourself, what stories are shaping your life? And are they the stories you want to be true? Chapter 6, Destroying the Comfort Zone. Before it destroys you. A ship is safest in the harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. Your comfort zone might feel safe, but if you stay inside it, you will never grow. Every time you avoid a challenge, every time you retreat from fear, you reinforce a life of limitation. Think about the last time discomfort stopped you from taking action. Maybe you wanted to start a new project, but fear held you back. Maybe you wanted to speak up in a meeting, but you stayed quiet. Maybe you had an idea that could change your life, but you let it slip away. That feeling of fear, that tightness in your chest, that hesitation, it's not a warning sign. It's a compass. It's pointing directly at your next level of growth. Elon Musk understands this better than most. In 2002, he sold his shares in PayPal and faced a choice. He could retire comfortably, or he could risk everything on industries he knew little about: space exploration and electric vehicles. Most people would have taken the safe route, but Musk didn't. When he founded SpaceX, he didn't just hire rocket scientists. He became one. He spent months studying rocket engineering, immersing himself in orbital mechanics. During Tesla's early days, when the company faced near collapse, he didn't sit back and hope things improved. He slept on the factory floor, working 120-hour weeks, learning every aspect of auto manufacturing. The media mocked him. Experts said his companies would fail. SpaceX and Tesla both nearly went bankrupt. But Musk had built the muscle of discomfort. He knew that true success comes from stepping into the unknown, embracing failure, and pushing beyond limits. And that's the secret. Your comfort zone is not a place to live. It's a place to visit occasionally for rest. Growth happens outside of it. Take Noah, a software developer. For years, he avoided any situation that required public speaking. His heart would race at the mere thought of presenting in a meeting. He convinced himself, I'm just not that kind of person. But deep down, he knew this fear was holding him back. So he made a radical decision. Instead of signing up for a structured public speaking course, he did something far more terrifying. He joined an improv comedy class. It was exactly as uncomfortable as he feared. His voice cracked, his hands shook, and he wanted to run out of the room. But he stayed. By the third session, something shifted. He realized that when he messed up, people laughed with him, not at him. He learned to think on his feet. He became comfortable with discomfort. A month later, when his team needed someone to present a project to senior leadership, Noah volunteered. He was still nervous, but now he understood something new. Nervousness was just energy. He could channel it into engagement instead of fear. His presentation wasn't perfect, but it was real, authentic, and it was enough to get him noticed for a leadership position. This transformation wasn't just about work. It changed every part of Noah's life. He started speaking up more. He engaged in conversations he would have avoided. He even signed up for salsa dancing classes, something the old Noah would have never done. And it all started with one decision: to stop choosing comfort over growth. Now, ask yourself, where in your life have you been playing small? What opportunities have you avoided because they made you uncomfortable? What actions are you afraid to take? The key is simple. Take that step, even if it's small, even if it terrifies you. Because every time you choose growth over fear, you expand what's possible. And soon the things that once scared you will feel like second nature. Destroy the old, you create a new version of yourself. Chapter 7, Your Comfort Zone. Expands with action. Fear is a liar. It whispers in your mind, convincing you that you are safer inside your comfort zone. It tells you that if you step outside the familiar, you will fail. You will be judged. You will embarrass yourself. But here's the truth. Your comfort zone isn't a fixed space. It grows or shrinks based on the choices you make every day. If you stay within your comfort zone, avoiding risks, avoiding challenges, avoiding discomfort, it becomes smaller. Soon, even small decisions, speaking up in a meeting, taking a new opportunity, or trying something different, feel overwhelming. But if you push against the edges of your comfort zone daily, it stretches. The things that once terrified you become normal. Noah understood this. For years, he lived inside the cage of his fears. He avoided public speaking. He avoided drawing attention to himself. He told himself, "I'm just not that kind of person." Then he made one decision. He signed up for an improv comedy class. It wasn't easy. The first few sessions were humiliating. His voice cracked. His hands shook. His mind went blank on stage. But he kept showing up. He kept pushing through the fear. And something incredible happened. The discomfort that once felt unbearable became manageable. The nervous energy that once paralyzed him became something he could use. A month later, when his workplace needed someone to present a project, Noah did something unthinkable. He volunteered. The fear was still there, but this time it didn't control him. The presentation wasn't perfect, but it was enough to shift how others saw him. More importantly, it shifted how he saw himself. His manager noticed. He was given bigger opportunities. Soon, people started coming to him for advice. He wasn't the quiet guy in the corner anymore. He had stepped into a new identity, one of confidence, leadership, and boldness. But here's the real lesson. Noah didn't wait to feel confident before he took action. He took action first, and confidence followed. That's how growth works. You don't think your way into being courageous. You act your way into it. Your comfort zone will expand only if you force it to. The challenge for you is simple. Do something today that scares you. Not next week. Not when you feel ready. Today. Because readiness is a myth, you will never feel ready. You must act before the fear goes away. And when you do, you will realize what once terrified you will become second nature. Chapter 8. Fear of judgment is an illusion. Think about the last time you wanted to do something but held back because of what others might think. Maybe you wanted to share an idea in a meeting, but you stayed quiet. Maybe you wanted to post something online, but you feared criticism. Maybe you wanted to pursue a dream, but you worried about looking foolish. This fear of judgment is one of the biggest traps that keep people small. But here's the secret. Most people aren't thinking about you. They're too busy thinking about themselves. You spend hours replaying an embarrassing moment in your mind, but others forget it in seconds. You hesitate to speak up because you think people are analyzing your every word, but they're too caught up in their own insecurities to notice. Lady Gaga understood this. Early in her career, she faced constant rejection. Music executives told her she was too weird, too theatrical, too different. She could have toned herself down. She could have blended in. But she did the opposite. She leaned into everything that made her unique. When critics said her outfits were too outrageous, she wore a dress made of raw meat. When they said she was too eccentric, she turned her performances into elaborate artistic statements. She refused to be trapped by the opinions of others. And the result? She didn't just succeed, she changed the music industry. But her freedom from judgment wasn't something she was born with. It was something she trained herself into. Every time she faced criticism and stayed true to herself, she became stronger. Every time she ignored the doubters and did what felt right, she built her resilience. You can do the same. Take Mia, a marketing executive who lived in fear of what others thought. For years, she played it safe. She had bold ideas but never pitched them. She wanted to start her own agency but worried about failure. Even in her personal life, she held back. She loved bright colors but only wore neutral tones to avoid standing out. Then she made a decision. She called it her liberation experiment. For 1 week, she made choices only based on what she wanted, not what she thought others would approve of. On Monday, she wore a bright yellow pantsuit she had been too afraid to wear before. At first, she felt self-conscious, but by lunchtime, she had a realization. No one cared. Most people were too busy with their own lives to give her outfit more than a passing glance. On Tuesday, she pitched her boldest marketing idea in a meeting. One colleague rolled his eyes, another looked skeptical, but the client loved it. By Wednesday, she was unstoppable. She signed up for a stand-up comedy class, something she had always wanted to try but avoided out of fear. Her first performance wasn't perfect. She stumbled over words. Some jokes didn't land, but she survived. And she realized fear of judgment had been far worse than actual judgment. By the end of the week, something unexpected happened. The more she embraced her true self, the more others gravitated toward her. Colleagues started coming to her for creative advice. A senior executive noticed her newfound confidence and gave her a leadership opportunity. And the best part? She felt alive in a way she never had before. Most people are trapped by the fear of judgment, but those who break free realize something life-changing. Most of the judgment they fear exists only in their imagination. Now, ask yourself, what would you do if you knew no one was watching? Then go do it. Chapter 9. Destroy the old you to rebuild. People stay in unfulfilling jobs, toxic relationships, and bad habits for years. Not because they want to, but because they're afraid of losing the familiar. Even when their old life is suffocating them, they cling to it. But here's the truth. You cannot reinvent yourself without first burying the old you. Think about a snake shedding its skin. It's uncomfortable. It's vulnerable, but it's necessary for growth. If the snake refuses to shed its skin, it becomes trapped, unable to expand. Your reinvention requires the same courage. Arnold Schwarzenegger understood this. By 1975, he was the king of bodybuilding. He had won 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles. He was respected, admired, at the top of his game. He could have stayed in that world forever. But he did something radical. He walked away. He wanted to become an actor, but Hollywood executives laughed at him. They said his name was too hard to pronounce, his muscles were too big, his accent was too thick. Most people would have given up. But Schwarzenegger knew something crucial. His past success was his biggest obstacle. If he wanted to build a new future, he had to destroy the old version of himself. So he started from scratch. He took acting classes. He trained his voice. He studied film. At first, he was rejected over and over again. Then came Conan the Barbarian, then the Terminator. Then he became one of the most recognizable names in Hollywood. Not because he waited for permission, but because he burned his old identity to the ground. The question is, are you willing to do the same? Destroy the old you, create a new version of yourself. Chapter 10. Destroying the old you to make room for the new. People don't stay stuck because they lack potential. They stay stuck because they are afraid of letting go. You might think that change is about adding new habits, learning new skills, or making small improvements. But real transformation, the kind that completely reshapes your life, doesn't start with adding. It starts with destroying. You must be willing to burn away the parts of yourself that no longer serve you. That means letting go of the beliefs, habits, and identities that keep you small. It means walking away from the comfortable routines that make you feel safe but leave you unfulfilled. It means surrendering the version of yourself that is keeping you trapped. Think of a forest fire. At first, it looks like pure destruction. The trees burn, the ground is scorched, everything that once stood tall is reduced to ash. But what happens next? The soil becomes richer. New growth begins. The land transforms into something stronger, more vibrant, and more alive than before. This is the process of reinvention. You cannot build a new you while clinging to the old. Arnold Schwarzenegger understood this. By 1975, he was a legend in the bodybuilding world. He had won 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles. He had built a name, a reputation, an identity. But he saw something most people miss. His greatest success had become his biggest prison. He could have stayed in bodybuilding forever, collecting trophies, basking in the comfort of his dominance. But he wanted more. He wanted to be an actor. Hollywood laughed at him. Casting directors told him he had no chance. His name was too hard to pronounce. His accent was too thick. His muscles were too big. Most people would have taken the hint. They would have accepted their place and stayed where they were comfortable. But Schwarzenegger understood the secret of transformation. He had to destroy the old version of himself to create the new. So he walked away from bodybuilding and started from scratch. He took acting lessons. He trained his voice. He studied film. At first, he failed. He was rejected over and over again, but he kept going. Then came Conan the Barbarian. Then the Terminator. Then he became one of the most recognizable names in Hollywood. Not because he waited for permission, but because he burned his old identity to the ground. The old version of him, the bodybuilding champion, had to die so the new version could be born. This is the truth most people never realize. Your past success can be your biggest limitation. If you define yourself by what you have already done, you will never become what you could be. So ask yourself, what part of your identity is keeping you stuck? What do you need to let go of to become who you are meant to be? What version of yourself must you destroy to create something greater? Because reinvention is not about improving the old you. It's about leaving it behind. Chapter 11. The Power of Choosing Your Future. Most people don't realize they have a choice. They think their identity is fixed. They believe their past defines them. They assume their personality, habits, and limitations are permanent. But they're wrong. Every single day, you are making choices that reinforce who you are. And at any moment, you can make a different choice. Consider Malcolm X. Before he became one of the most influential leaders in history, he was a completely different person. His life was shaped by crime, survival, and living on the streets. His name was Detroit Red, and he was known for hustling, gambling, and getting by however he could. So, if you had met him then, you would have assumed he was destined to stay the same forever. But everything changed when he went to prison. In those prison walls, Malcolm X made a choice. He could have accepted his fate, become another statistic, lived out the rest of his life as the person he had always been. Instead, he burned that version of himself to the ground. He didn't just read books, he devoured them. He didn't just learn, he transformed. By the time he left prison, he wasn't Detroit Red anymore. He had chosen a new name, a new purpose, a new life. And that choice shaped history. The lesson? You are not bound by your past. Your habits are not permanent. Your personality is not fixed. The only thing keeping you from becoming who you want to be is your attachment to who you've been. Leo learned this firsthand. For years, he accepted his identity as the quiet one. He was the guy who had good ideas but never shared them. The person who saw opportunities but let them pass by. The one who convinced himself, I'm just not that type of person. Then one day, he asked himself a radical question. What if I'm wrong? What if he wasn't naturally shy? What if his hesitation wasn't a personality trait but a choice? So he decided to do something different. Instead of asking, what would I do? He started asking, what would a confident person do? When a meeting came up and he had an idea, he forced himself to speak, despite the fear. When a social event came and his instinct was to stay home, he said yes. At first, it felt unnatural. He looked in the mirror and thought, who am I trying to fool? But over time, something changed. The actions that once felt forced became natural. The identity that once felt like a costume became real. Within 3 months, Leo's colleagues no longer saw him as the quiet guy in the corner. They saw him as a leader. When a leadership position opened up, his name was the first one mentioned. Not because he had changed who he was, but because he had finally allowed himself to be who he could be. And it all started with one simple decision: to stop reinforcing the old identity and start stepping into a new one. That decision is available to you right now. You don't need permission. You don't need more time. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You just need to decide. And then act. Because every time you make a choice, you are writing the story of who you are. So what kind of story are you writing? Destroy the old, you create a new version of yourself. Chapter 12. Stepping into discomfort to expand your limits. A ship is safest in the harbor, but that is not what ships are built for. Every single day, you make micro-decisions that shape your future. Some of these decisions keep you stuck. Others push you forward. Most people unknowingly choose comfort over potential. They avoid the difficult conversation, even when speaking up could change their career. They hold back their true thoughts, even when authenticity could deepen their relationships. They hesitate to take a leap, even when it could lead to their greatest breakthrough. The reason? Fear. Fear of failure, fear of looking foolish, fear of stepping into the unknown. But here's the truth. Your comfort zone is not a safe place. It is a prison. Every time you avoid something because it makes you uncomfortable, your world shrinks. Your potential shrinks. The life you could have lived slips further and further away. Elon Musk understood this. In 2002, he had two options: retire comfortably after selling his shares in PayPal. Risk everything to build something no one believed in. Most people would have chosen safety. They would have bought the mansion, invested in low-risk stocks, and lived a quiet, comfortable life. But Musk knew something crucial. Discomfort is the price of innovation. Instead of playing it safe, he launched two companies that seemed destined for failure: SpaceX and Tesla. At first, the setbacks were brutal. SpaceX's first 3 rockets exploded. Tesla faced near bankruptcy. Investors pulled out. Experts called him reckless. He could have walked away. He could have gone back to comfort, but he didn't. He slept on the factory floor. He studied rocket science himself. He worked 120-hour weeks, refusing to let failure define him. And because he was willing to endure discomfort, he reshaped entire industries. Your comfort zone is the enemy of your greatest potential. Take Noah, a software developer who avoided public speaking for years. He had convinced himself that he was just an introvert, that he was better behind the scenes, that leadership wasn't for him. But deep down, he knew his fear was holding him back. So instead of continuing to hide, he made a radical decision. He signed up for an improv comedy class. It was his worst nightmare. He stammered. His hands shook. He wanted to disappear. But he kept showing up. Week after week, he pushed through the discomfort. He learned to embrace mistakes, to think on his feet, to let go of the fear of judgment. And something incredible happened. The fear that once controlled him started losing its grip. A month later, when a leadership opportunity opened at work, he did something unimaginable. He volunteered to present. His voice still wavered. His hands still trembled. But he did it. And in that moment, he realized something life-changing. Fear never truly goes away. But if you act despite fear, you gain power over it. Your challenge is this: find the thing you have been avoiding out of fear, the conversation, the opportunity, the risk, and do it. Because every time you lean into discomfort, you expand your limits. Chapter 13. Overcoming the fear of what others think. Imagine standing on stage, ready to give an important speech. Your heart pounds, your hands sweat, your mind races. But it's not the speech itself that terrifies you. It's the thought of what others might think. What if they laugh? What if you mess up? What if they think you're a joke? Now, ask yourself, how many times have you let the fear of judgment control your life? The outfit you didn't wear because you worried it was too bold. The idea you didn't pitch because you thought it wasn't good enough. The dream you didn't pursue because you feared people would talk. But here's the truth. Most people aren't thinking about you. They are too busy thinking about themselves. Lady Gaga understood this. Early in her career, critics mocked her. Music executives told her she was too theatrical. Fellow students at NYU created a Facebook group to make fun of her. Industry professionals said she would never make it. Most people would have toned themselves down. But she did the opposite. When they called her too weird, she became weirder. When they said her outfits were ridiculous, she wore a dress made of raw meat. When they said her performances were too outlandish, she made them even bigger. She amplified everything that made her different. And the result? She didn't just succeed, she changed pop culture. But here's what most people don't realize. Gaga wasn't born with an unshakable mindset. She trained herself to stop caring about what others thought. Every time she faced criticism and stayed true to her vision, she strengthened her immunity to judgment. And you can do the same. Mia was a marketing executive who spent years living in fear of what people thought. She had creative ideas but played it safe. She wanted to start her own agency but worried about failure. She loved bold colors but only wore neutral tones to avoid standing out. Then she made a decision. She called it her liberation experiment. For 1 week, she made choices only based on what she wanted, not on what others might think. On Monday, she wore a bright yellow suit she had always been too afraid to wear. At first, she felt self-conscious, but by lunchtime, she realized something profound. No one cared. Most people were too busy with their own lives to spend more than a passing glance on her outfit. On Tuesday, she pitched a bold idea in a meeting. One colleague rolled his eyes. Another looked skeptical. But the client loved it. By Wednesday, she was unstoppable. She signed up for stand-up comedy, something she had always wanted to try, but had been too afraid of looking foolish. Her first performance wasn't perfect. She stumbled over her words. Some jokes didn't land. But she survived. And she realized fear of judgment had been far worse than actual judgment. By the end of the week, something unexpected happened. The more she embraced her true self, the more others gravitated toward her. Colleagues started coming to her for creative advice. A senior executive noticed her confidence and gave her a leadership opportunity. And the best part? She felt alive in a way she never had before. Here's what most people don't understand. Most of the judgment you fear exists only in your mind. People aren't evaluating you as much as you think. And even if they do judge you, their opinions mean nothing. So ask yourself, what would you do if you knew no one was watching? Then go do it. Destroy the old you, create a new version of yourself. Chapter 14. The Illusion of Others' Opinions. Most people live their lives as if they are being watched under a spotlight. They carefully choose their words. They hesitate before making bold decisions. They shrink themselves trying to avoid criticism. But here's what they don't realize. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to think about you. Think about the last time you saw someone do something bold. Maybe they wore an unusual outfit. Maybe they spoke out in a meeting. Maybe they started a new business. Did you spend hours analyzing their actions? Did it change your life in any way? Probably not. And yet when it comes to ourselves, we assume every small move we make is being watched, judged, and criticized. This illusion keeps people trapped. Mia learned this the hard way. For years, she had ideas she wanted to share, but every time she had the chance, she hesitated. She imagined her colleagues rolling their eyes. She feared her bosses thinking she was foolish. So she stayed silent. She played it safe, and no one noticed her. Then she started her liberation experiment, 1 week of making decisions based on what she wanted instead of what she thought others expected of her. By the end of the week, everything had changed. She realized that the judgment she feared was mostly in her head. No one cared about the things she had spent years worrying about. And the moment she stopped holding back, she started rising. She was invited to lead a major project. Colleagues started coming to her for advice. Her confidence became magnetic. The same will happen for you. Because the truth is, people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think. And those who judge? Their opinions say more about them than about you. So the next time you hesitate because of what others might think, ask yourself, will their opinion matter in a year? Will their judgment affect my life in any real way? If the answer is no, move forward without fear. Chapter 15, Shedding the Old Skin to Grow. People don't resist change because they don't want a better life. They resist change because it requires shedding the old version of themselves. And that is painful. Think of a snake shedding its skin. It's not an easy process. It's uncomfortable. It leaves them vulnerable. But if they don't shed their old skin, they cannot grow. They become trapped in a body that no longer fits them. The same is true for you. Right now, the version of you that exists is shaped by outdated beliefs, old habits, and past experiences. Maybe those things helped you survive. But survival is not the same as thriving. If you want to grow into your fullest potential, you must be willing to let go of the version of yourself that is keeping you small. It will feel uncomfortable. You might feel lost at first, like you don't recognize yourself. But that's not a bad thing. That is proof that you are growing. Arnold Schwarzenegger understood this. By the mid-1970s, he was a legend in bodybuilding. Six-time Mr. Olympia champion, the undisputed king of his field. But he saw something most people miss. His greatest success had become his biggest limitation. He could have stayed in that world forever, collecting trophies and admiration. But he knew that in order to step into something bigger, he had to let go of his old identity. So he walked away from bodybuilding and pursued acting. Hollywood executives laughed at him. His name was too hard to pronounce. His accent was too thick. His muscles were too big. Most people would have taken the hint. But Schwarzenegger understood that reinvention requires burning the old version of yourself to the ground. He took acting lessons. He trained his voice. He built a new identity from scratch. At first, he was rejected. Then came Conan the Barbarian. Then came the Terminator. Then came a career that made him a global icon. Not because he waited for permission, but because he destroyed the old version of himself and made room for something greater. Now, ask yourself, what part of your identity is keeping you stuck? What do you need to let go of in order to grow? What version of yourself must you leave behind to become who you are meant to be? Because reinvention isn't about improving the old you. It's about leaving it behind. Chapter 16, The Power of Reinvention. Most people believe their personality is fixed. They think, this is just who I am. But that is a lie. Your brain is constantly changing, rewiring itself based on your choices and actions. You are not stuck. Your identity is not fixed. Who you are is a story you have been telling yourself, and you can rewrite it at any moment. Malcolm X understood this. Before he became a revolutionary leader, he was Detroit Red, a street hustler, a criminal, a man shaped by the circumstances of his past. If he had accepted that identity as permanent, he would have remained trapped. But he didn't. When he went to prison, he made a radical choice. He devoured books, he re-educated himself, he reshaped his mind. By the time he left prison, Detroit Red no longer existed. Malcolm X was born. He didn't improve himself. He transformed himself. Leo's transformation was different, but followed the same principle. For years, he accepted his identity as the quiet one. He avoided speaking up. He hesitated to take leadership. He convinced himself he just wasn't that type of person. Then he asked himself a simple question. What if I'm wrong? What if his identity wasn't a fact, but just a habit? So he started making different choices. Instead of asking, what would I do? He asked, what would a confident person do? Then he did that. At first it felt fake, like he was pretending. But something incredible happened. After a few weeks, the actions that once felt forced became natural. The identity that once felt like a costume became real. Within 3 months, his colleagues no longer saw him as the quiet guy in the corner. They saw him as a leader. And when a leadership position opened up, his name was the first mention. Not because he had changed who he was, but because he had finally allowed himself to be who he could be. This is the power of reinvention. You are not trapped in the person you've been. At any moment, you can choose a new story. The only question is, are you willing to let go of the old one? Destroy the old, you create a new version of yourself. Chapter 17. The lies that keep you stuck. Most people don't realize that they are living inside a prison. Not one with bars and walls, but a prison built from the lies they've told themselves. Lies like, I'm just not that kind of person. I wasn't born with that talent. I've never been good at that. This is just the way I am. These lies are comfortable. They protect you from failure. They keep you from stepping into the unknown. But they also keep you small. The truth is, who you are is not fixed. Your personality, habits, and skills are not set in stone. They are choices. And at any moment, you can make a new choice. Emma believed the lie that she was bad at relationships. For years, she told herself the same story. I always mess things up. I'm just not good at this. Love never works out for me. Every time something went wrong, it became proof that her story was true. Until one day she asked herself, what if I'm wrong? What if her past wasn't a prediction of her future? What if she wasn't discovering her identity, but creating it? So she made a decision. She stopped saying, I'm bad at relationships. Instead, she told herself, I'm learning to connect in a healthier way. She stopped saying, I always choose the wrong people. Instead, she told herself, I'm getting better at recognizing what I need. At first, it felt fake. She had spent years reinforcing her old story, but slowly her actions started to change. She set better boundaries. She stopped repeating the same patterns. And when she met James, something was different. She didn't sabotage the connection. She didn't fall into old habits. Because she had rewritten her story, she had also rewritten her reality. You can do the same. Right now, there is a lie you're telling yourself, and the only thing keeping it alive is your belief in it. Chapter 18. How fear becomes your master. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is just a tool. It is your brain's way of trying to keep you safe. But here's the problem. Your brain doesn't know the difference between real danger and imagined danger. It reacts the same way whether you are facing a life-threatening situation or just stepping outside your comfort zone. It tells you, don't take that risk. Don't speak up. Don't try something new. Not because it wants to sabotage you, but because it thinks it's protecting you. But if you listen to that fear, it becomes your master. It controls every decision you make, and you never grow. Noah was terrified of public speaking. Every time he imagined standing in front of a group, his heart raced, his palms sweated. His brain screamed at him to stay quiet, to avoid embarrassment, to stay small. But one day he realized something. His fear wasn't a warning. It was a signal that he was about to grow. So he stopped seeing fear as something to avoid. He saw it as a compass. The more fear he felt towards something, the more important it was for him to do it. He forced himself to speak up in meetings. He volunteered for presentations. He even joined an improv class, something that terrified him. And slowly the fear that once controlled him lost its power. It didn't disappear completely, but it no longer made his decisions for him. You must learn the same lesson. Your fear is not proof that you should stop. It is proof that you are standing at the edge of your growth. The question is, will you step forward or retreat? Chapter 19. The prison of the past. Most people live in a cage made of their own history. They define themselves by their past mistakes. They let old failures shape their self-worth. They believe that because they've never done something before, they never will. But your past does not define you. It is nothing more than a story, and you are the one writing it. Malcolm X's past could have defined him. As Detroit read, he was a hustler, a criminal, a man shaped by survival. If he had believed that was who he was, he would have never changed. But he didn't accept his past as his identity. He chose to burn it to the ground, to replace it with something greater. The same choice is available to you. Right now, you are holding on to an old version of yourself, one shaped by past experiences, past failures, past beliefs. And that old version is keeping you small. If you want to grow, you must be willing to let go. Not just of old habits, but of old identities. If you have always been the quiet one, let it go. If you have always been bad at relationships, let it go. If you have always been not good enough, burn that story to the ground. Because none of it is real. It is just a script you've been following. And you can rewrite it at any moment. So ask yourself, who would you be if you didn't let your past define you? Chapter 20, Becoming the Architect of Your Life. Right now you are building your future. Not tomorrow, not next year. Right now. With every thought you think, with every belief you hold, with every action you take, you are shaping who you will become. Most people don't realize they have this power. They drift through life reacting to circumstances. They assume their personality is fixed. They think success is for other people. But the truth is, you are the architect of your own life. You can design it however you choose. But first, you must take control of the blueprint. That means questioning everything. The beliefs you've accepted, the fears you've surrendered to, the habits that have kept you stuck. You must become intentional about who you are becoming. Because if you don't design your future, someone else will do it for you. And you might not like what they build. The question is, will you keep living by default? Or will you start creating the future you truly want?